Hello, Facebook
Hello.
family and friends and people that we don't know who will be tuning into this video. This is Thomas and Juliana coming to you from our home in Georgia. We created a video on Monday that we posted on Tuesday. And when we created that first video, we was wearing our shades, right, Julie? We was wearing our shades. And we explained to you, the audience, that while we were wearing the shades in the video, and what we explained to you is that shades are used for what, Julie?
Hiding behind.
And to some degree, there may be a lot of people in life that wear shades to block the sunlight. But as you can tell, tonight, there's no sunlight. We're outside of our backyard at nighttime. It's about 10:30 at night when we're creating this video. So we're not blocking the sun. The reason we have on these shades is because we, Thomas and Juliana, has hid behind a topic for many, many years. Something that we've had in our lives that we kind of hid behind and didn't want a lot of people to know about. And that topic is mental illness. And on the previous video, we shared with you that for the next 12 weeks, we want to create videos to come into your lives and to come into your homes and share our story with you about us living with mental illness. I was diagnosed when I was 13 years old with mental illness called bipolar disorder. And my wife was diagnosed with schizoaffect. Tell them what that is, Julie.
Bipolar and schizophrenia together.
Bipolar and schizophrenia together. And what year was that? Or what? How old were you?
I was 25.
She was 25 years old. That's a long time ago that she was diagnosed. That's all I tell you, a long time ago. But we've lived with this illness. We've been married for 21 years as of last Thursday on June the 13th. We lived with this illness when we were single, and now been married for 21 years. We've also lived with the illness being married. And so what we want to do over the next 12 weeks is share our lives with you, to share some of our struggles, share our experiences with you. And we thought about this. There's no better way to introduce us and mental illness than to share with you guys a documentary that was done about shedding the stigma of mental illness. Fortunately, we happen to have been interviewed in this documentary, and we are sharing our story about our mental illness just a little bit. We only had a limited time to share about our lives, but we're going to spend 12 weeks sharing with you guys a little more details. But we want to share this video documentary with you. It's about 30 minutes long. It's a video that features some doctors, some people in the mental health field, and some history about mental health. So we want to encourage you to tune into this video when you have about 30 minutes to spend to really look at the whole thing. Because what we don't want you to do is to start it, 10 minutes and then have to come back and catch up where you left off at. So if you can invest 30 minutes to sit down and watch this, it's going to be very educational, and it's going to be very informative, and you're going to get an introduction, a short introduction about Thomas and Juliana Watson and our battle with mental illness and how it all got started. So, my wife has something to say, and then we're going to start the video.
We're not psychologists, we're not psychologists, we're not counselors, we're not therapists. We're just coming to our story to you.
Correct. Great point, baby. We are not psychiatrists. We are not doctors. We are not psychologists or therapists or counselors. We are just people that are people that have mental illness, and we are in recovery. We're in recovery every day. So we're not giving any medical advice or no kind of advice like that. We're just sharing our lives with you. So Great note, great footnote for that, Juliana. Thank you very much. And you guys, please give me a second to turn on the video and sit back and enjoy. And we'll come on right after the video and close it out, okay? Thank you.
In America, we are facing a growing health epidemic that shows no signs of slowing down. Headline after headline, we are faced with this growing health crisis that affects so many who suffer in silence, fearing the crippling social stigma. A staggering 61.5 million Americans experience some form of mental illness in a given year. In this edition of AIB Presents, we take a closer look at the facts and myths of mental illness. Join us as we build bridges of understanding, awareness, and hope to millions of Americans on AIB Presents, Shedding the Stigma. The story of mental illness is a long one, dating back to ancient cultures like the Egyptians, Greeks, Indians, and Romans, who viewed the illness as a form of religious punishment or demonic possession. In the 1840s, American activist Dorothea Dix lobbied fiercely for better living conditions and care for prisoners with mental illness. She persuaded Congress to fund 32 psychiatric hospitals throughout the country. In the 19th century, organized psychiatric institutions became a new norm.
The men and women from every walk of life who each year pass through doors like this into the mental hospitals of our land. Here, in the story of Fred Clanton and the typical Oklahoma State Hospital to which he came, the spotlight focuses on these people.
And by the 1950s, public service announcements were hitting the airwaves.
Hello, I'm Chad Hunter. Did you know that mental illness claims more victims than any other disease? That's right. 1 American in every 10 is suffering from some disabling mental or emotional disorder. Please join in the fight against mental illness. Support your mental health association. Thank you.
Committees, commissions, and organizations sprouted across the country, with mental health advocates leading the way, expressing open dialogue and research pertaining to brain diseases. Holding hearings to further the conversation, mental health advocates and those living with mental illness had a platform to stand up against the stigma.
Well, what we know is that research has shown that 1 in 4 Americans will have a diagnosable mental illness during the course of their lifetime. So mental illness really does affect a lot of people in this country, and it cuts across all the demographic lines, the rich, the poor. It doesn't matter what race you are, male or female, young or old. The numbers are that folks will get affected by mental illness, and many of them during the course of their lifetime.
Well, there are two sides to it. First of all, you have the genuine mental health issues that are created because of our changing environment, job loss, people basically being afraid, being angry, moving consistently, never settling down. And the second one is that which is related to the mass influx of pharmacology or psychological-based manipulative drugs and prescriptions.
Well, obviously, one of the factors that is at work is the genetic factor. It's the heritability, and we know that much of mental illness is inherited. So there's a significant group of individuals who will inherit that. And so I think it's important that individuals and families who do struggle with mental illness or do have a history of it certainly are talking about that within their families.
I mean, in America, we have maybe 2 million people who have been diagnosed as true psychotics in the form of schizophrenia. About 6 million people have been diagnosed with bipolar, about 40 million with anxiety disorders, and I'm not even including those individuals who have nutritional disorders like anorexia and bulimia. Then there are issues that are related to individuals that have other issues that relate to depression, about 20 million people. Nowadays, anything can be described as depression. Your basketball team lose, depression. You wreck your car, depression. Not to mention we're in an environment that is very stressful. And you have to look at these in terms of enabling and reinforcing factors. Now, when you talk about legitimate mental health issues, some of the reinforcing factors that we see out here are people struggling to feed their family or to find employment, being in a rat race, keeping up with the Joneses. And a lot of the psychopathy that is being mimicked in culture is basically being introduced through mass media, television, music. And that's the legitimate side. But then again, there are also those issues whereby people try to find a cheap and easy solution to providing prescription drugs to medicate things that really don't need medication. A culture that is seeking instant satisfaction, instant gratification, instant medication, instant solutions to problems will be the type of culture that will fall susceptible to a basically drug preferable culture. And when we talk about mental health, what we fail to realize is that schizophrenia or bipolar is no different than cancer or HIV. And the issue for us is, do we want to treat health outcomes and treat them in terms of not being a stigma? Or do we want to continue the status quo of perpetuating falsities and fake narratives about mental health and the outcomes? And right now, the focus is more so on trying to profit off of mental health when you think about pharmaceutical and health insurance industries, as opposed to trying to get people to actually deal with the problem.
Well, there are a number of organizations, mental health advocacy groups like NAMI, the National Alliance of Mental Illness, Mental Health America, the Carter Center. All those groups and others are very involved in educating the public about mental illness, its prevalence, how common it is, and what the treatment options are.
NAMI stands for the National Alliance on Mental Illness, and it's the nation's largest grassroots organization dedicated to providing better help for the millions of Americans who have a mental health diagnosis and their families.
With faith communities being in some cases the first line of defense, NAMI instituted a support program specifically targeting faith communities, educating faith leaders on how to handle individuals suffering with mental illness.
I think in the faith communities particularly, many people just hide their mental health struggles and they suffer in silence because of stigma. They don't want to be considered crazy, or they don't want to be judged as maybe lacking in faith, or that they need to pray more. And for a family member, we certainly don't want to be thought of as having caused mental illness in someone we love dearly. And those are all myths, if you will, that contribute to the stigma. And so a lot of people just live in isolation at a time when that spiritual support would be so critical. So NAMI, in reaching out to faith communities, is to educate different faith leaders. It's an interfaith movement open to all religious organizations. And we would like to educate the faith leaders to help people in their congregation, because one in four families will suffer a mental health diagnosis at some point during any given year. 1 in 4 families, that is a lot of a congregation, and yet probably faith leaders don't talk to a quarter of their congregants about it because of the stigma. So if we educate the clergy so that they'll break the silence, they'll talk about their own struggles, the struggles of others, where it becomes as common to pray for mental health issues as it does for cancer or anything else.
In 2008, Dr. Rad founded FaithWorks, a nonprofit organization that came about as a result of the crisis in the state's psychiatric hospital system. Being a non-paying second job, it was something he felt called to do.
The faith community is an integral part of the social fabric of any community, but especially down here in the South. And so it's an important opportunity to have access to individuals who might not otherwise be aware of mental health issues, and an opportunity to educate them at a place where they worship. So So access was one of the reasons for engaging the faith community. And the other part of engaging that particular group is the fact that faith, spirituality, is such an important part of who we are as human beings. And that really comes out of my own sense of faith and being an important part of my life, and feeling that in addition to biology and psychology, so the brain, the mind, there's a third part of us, which is the soul, which is the spirit. And so we need to also acknowledge that part if we're going to truly best help those with mental illness and encourage them and point them in the direction of resources that will help them. Certainly those with a spiritual interest and those with certainly a faith orientation would benefit from understanding how their faith can also support their recovery.
Thomas and Juliana Watson look like your typical everyday married couple, both deeply rooted in their strong faith and values. They
like, man, that plan to do this. Like, man, that relationship didn't work. That man didn't stick around to be my father. And that happened probably 11, 12 different times. After it happened probably the 8th time, my heart kind of got hard towards expecting, you know, a father to stick around, a man to stick around and be my father. So I became bitter. I had a lot of anger issues. I had a lot of bitterness issues. I was just angry with the world. And I didn't trust men as far as I could see them. And basically, at the age of 11 years old, I plotted to take one of my mom's boyfriends to take his life, you know. I actually got a big butcher knife, had my brother kind of get his attention, and when he had his attention, I went out to stab the guy in his chest through his heart. And as soon as I got ready to stab him, my neighbor saw what was happening, and he shot a gun in the air, and it scared the guy off, and he ran off. And my plan for taking this guy's life didn't happen. And I even got upset about that. I was like, man, I had a plan to do this and it didn't happen. And that led to my battle with mental illness right after that, because I was probably 12 years old when that happened, 11 or 12, and I had my first mental episode when I was 13 years old.
Thomas was later sent to a mental institution to cope with his feelings of anger and resentment. Once in treatment, he revealed a secret he had been keeping from his friends and family.
Growing up, a close friend of the family had took advantage of me sexually and had sexually molested me. So I had a lot of issues when it came to trusting men, and a lot of emotional instability. And no one really knew at the time what I was going through, because I was told by the perpetrator that if I ever mentioned what happened, that he would kill me and my family. So I was scared as a teenager to even share with my mom what happened. So I went through a lot of withdrawals, a lot of emotional things that I went through, and I wound up in a mental institution at the age of 13 years old.
From there, mental institutions became a revolving door for Thomas as he struggled with the idea of taking daily medication as a growing teen who yearned to be normal. Once Thomas reached the age of 18, he connected with Chris Kids, an organization dedicated to improving the community by providing children, adults, and families high-quality trauma-informed behavioral health services and support systems.
Kids. And I transitioned from the mental hospital to Chris Kids, and there at Chris Kids is where I started to learn about the importance of taking medications. Like a diabetic that has sugar issues, I had a chemical imbalance and I needed the medication to balance me out. And it still took me a while to really understand that and really get it, but as soon as I understood it, I stayed at a hospital for a long time.
My name is Juliana Watson. I have schizophrenia and bipolar. I was in denial with my illness because I didn't want to be associated with mental illness. I didn't want nothing to do with it. I didn't want to take medication. At the time, medication was different than it is now. It was a lot of side effects. Drooling, steering off my face, shaking, all kind of crazy stuff. But I didn't want to be associated with it. I was in and out the hospital like a revolving door. I get well, but I didn't know what the medication made me well. I thought I didn't need the medication. So I would get in the hospital, get a job, in the hospital, get a job, get a hospital, get a job. So it was a revolving door because I didn't want to accept that I needed to take the medication. So about 2 years in the issue, I ended up taking the medication for a while, and that was normal. As normal as what you can call what is normal, you know. And I had a job working at a mental hospital, working with mentally disturbed kids, and didn't put the clue together that I had a mental illness and I needed to take my medication. So in the midst of that, I got pregnant, and I had a baby, and that didn't make me take my medication. When I was in labor pains, I was out of my mind because I had stopped taking my medication. I was visiting my psychiatrist, social worker, clinical social worker, and she knows that I was in labor, and she knows that I wasn't taking my medication. When I had the baby, you know, you're supposed to go home. I went to the 13th floor. They escorted me, they had a sheriff escorted me to the 13th floor because I didn't want to go. I wanted to go home. I was out of my mind when I had my baby.
Juliana gave birth to a bouncing baby boy named Julian, who was born with spina bifida, a developmental congenital disorder caused by the incomplete closing of the embryonic neural tube. She was stabilized for 3 weeks on the 13th floor at Grady Hospital. Once the child reached 6 months old, Juliana was admitted to the hospital yet again for not taking her medication. A single working mother in denial about her mental illness and the importance of taking her medication, Juliana's mental health took a turn for the worst. She began hearing voices instructing her to do the unthinkable. Kill yourself, die, murder, kill, die.
So I decided not to take the medication again. I was out of my medicine for 3 weeks. Was psychotic, out of my mind, and I get hypersexual. I want to have sex with everybody, and hear the voices. Didn't feed my baby. Then the voices one day said, "Buy some sleeping pills, kill yourself." So I told my sister I had money in the bank, check with my job, but I thought I had no money. So I told my sister I had no money. I need money for food, but I went to buy sleeping pills. So I took the sleeping pills, and that night the voices told me, hang yourself, kill yourself. So I tried to hang myself. Then he said, kill your baby, kill your baby, kill your baby. So I ended up taking my baby life because I made that decision. I didn't want to take my medication. I made that decision. So I had to live with that for a long time, guilt-ridden for a long time.
Juliana strangled baby Julian to death and ended up fleeing the scene, seeking temporary refuge in a drove of bushes off of Beaufort Highway. She later came back to the scene and confessed the murder to her sister and was immediately brought back to Grady's 13th floor. She stayed for 30 days, undergoing treatment and stabilization, and wasn't allowed to attend her own child's funeral. After spending a month at the hospital, she was transferred to the Fulton County Jail, where she spent a year awaiting trial for the murder of her son.
The night before my trial, I got on my knees. I wasn't a praying woman. I prayed for my food, but I didn't pray for anything else. But that night I prayed. I said, you get me through this, God, I'd do anything you want me to do. So the next day, I went to court. The baby father, I could understand. He wanted me to get life. I could understand that was his son, and he was hurt, but he didn't understand my illness. And then I had my family, my friend, my psychiatrist, my social worker, my employees, all was over there with me. But I didn't know that this was going on because I was still psychotic, out of my mind. But I knew what everything was going on, but not really how intense it could be. I could get life for this. So my lawyer told me, he said, Judy, I had the first day you went to see a psychiatrist to the last day, he said, I had records and records and records and records. He did his homework. So the judge said, Miss Watson, stand up. He hit his gavel. He said, Miss Watson, stand up. Served 2, 8 on probation. I already did 1 year in prison, in jail, only had to do 1 year in prison, and 8 on probation. That was God. Because women are getting 40, 30 in life. He has a plan for me to help people with mental illness.
With her newfound faith in tow, Juliana was released from prison and became heavily involved in a local church that provided everything she had been searching for: love, acceptance, and forgiveness. Introduced by a fellow church member, Juliana met and married the love of her life.
When we got married, we didn't understand that he was bipolar and I was schizophrenia. We didn't know that. We didn't even think about that. All we was in love. And then about, what was 8 years in our marriage? I said, Tom, you know what? You bipolar, I'm schizophrenia. We're making it work.
Although Thomas accepted his wife and her past with the legal justice system, some individuals with mental illness lack the support of friends and family to intervene, often leading some to living on the streets or in local jails.
I mean, right now we have law enforcement leading the discussion on mental health issues as it relates to violence, which is feculent and makes no sense. I mean, you wouldn't go to a doctor who only has skills at, fixing plumbing or sheetrock. So why would we take advice on mental health from basically law enforcement personnel?
In January of 2012, the Gwinnett County Detention Center and the Solicitor's Office introduced a mental health pretrial diversion program for misdemeanor defendants. With 25% of jailed inmates suffering from mental illness, I traveled to the detention center to get a closer look at why the county decided to institute a program dedicated to helping those with mental illness rather than punishing them.
This is a program for misdemeanor defendants who are suffering under a severe or persistent mental illness. And the program provides accountability, treatment, and supervision for those persons. Initially, the mission is to get people stabilized before they're released, and after they're released, to get them in recovery.
We work very closely with several different community stakeholders, one of which is the National Alliance for the Mentally Ill, which is NAMI. I work intimately with them on several cases.
Well, the recovery involves treatment and supervision. And treatment involves maybe taking their medications, counseling, maybe therapy, whatever their individualized treatment plan requires in order to make them productive citizens, persons who are not a threat to themselves or to others, and hopefully overall improve their quality of life.
We have this umbrella term for the folks that we're looking to be approved for the program as severe and persistent mental illness. So those are any individuals who have a diagnosis of bipolar disorder, schizophrenia, schizoaffective disorder, or who might have a dual diagnosis of a substance use disorder and a major mental illness. Those are the folks who were maybe untreated or undertreated prior to incarceration, and as a result of an untreated or undertreated mental illness, they committed an offense. Those are the individuals that we're considering for approval for entering into the Health Services Pretrial Diversion Program.
Once accepted into the program, treatment options can vary depending on the individual's needs at the time and what we call is their appropriate level of care. Is really what we're looking for when I'm doing assessments. It also does depend on their insurance as well. If somebody does have private insurance, I will be the one that connects them to a provider in their network. Somebody that can provide psychiatric treatment, individual counseling, even groups possibly, to go to a group maybe once a week. With Viewpoint Health, we are the Community Service Board for Gwinnett County. We provide services for individuals that are indigent, which they don't have any funds, or they have Medicaid or Medicare. If they have those if they're indigent or have Medicaid or Medicare, I can get them connected with Viewpoint Health Services, which can also include psychiatric services, individual counseling, groups. We also have intensive services is our psychosocial rehabilitation program, which is a intensive program that is 5 days a week, Monday through Friday, that provides skills training for individuals that especially are coming out of the jail. They may have been in there for a long time and don't have the foundational skills to even live independently. So that program can actually provide them with that type of education and independent living skills, coping skills for their diagnosis, and even psychoeducation on what their diagnosis is and how to cope with that diagnosis.
Once an inmate successfully completes the program, criminal charges will be dismissed and they can move forward with expungement on the legal end. But it doesn't end there. Care and support services are still provided by their treatment provider. But are jails and prisons truly the place to treat the mentally ill?
It has to be. I mean, it is the system of last resort, isn't it? I mean, I think there used to be other social systems in place for this sort of thing that aren't there anymore. We closed our asylums, our institutions. We closed them. They did serve a purpose. I mean, in a way, maybe by closing them, you throw the baby out with the bathwater, and now these people are now on the streets. They end up in the criminal justice system. It's not maybe the best place for people. Obviously, sitting in jail does not address a person's mental health issues.
I have, at times, not wanted family members to bond out their loved ones because we are able to stabilize when needed in custody and provide a reentry plan that is doable. Individuals that are in the jail oftentimes, unfortunately, receive the best care that is available, especially for individuals that are indigents, because when we're looking at sometimes someone that's struggling with active psychosis, that person's most likely going to need inpatient treatment, which is a locked unit, and we know that our resources are scarce, and we do provide that here at the jail, and we do good work here at the Gwinnett County Mental Health Department.
With so many leading the charge for better understanding, how do we as a community reshape the conversation of what mental illness is and what it looks like?
I really don't know. I mean, this is going to take not just a singular political solution, but from the grassroots level, from the communities to the state and city legislators to the federal government. They all have to work in concert together. It has to take an effort like we mobilized for the HIV fight. It's going to require an effort like was needed to deal with the civil rights movement. I mean, these are serious medical conditions. It's like the war on poverty. We have to address these with tangible, practical solutions that everybody can contribute, not a top-down approach.
I think the first thing we need to do is really to combat stigma by alleviating the silence. We just need to speak out. I think we put on these masks that, everything is fine with me, and it's not. And that doesn't mean we need to unload at every opportunity, but we also need to not be so proud that we can't say, you know what, I need prayer. And my family needs prayer. We're going through a health crisis. And with any other illness, we would probably seek that, but we don't with mental illness, and that is what I feel like we need to do first and foremost.
When I tell people that I have mental illness, I don't get like, oh, you crazy, I can't hang around you, or they know the person before they know the illness. Know the person before the illness. Don't know the illness, what the illness is all about. Know the person. Know them, because they're human beings too. They want to be accepted. They want to be loved. They want to be noticed. They want to be encouraged. They want to be acknowledged. Know the person, not the illness.
All right. Facebook friends and family, thank you for tuning in to that documentary. And as you can see, that documentary was pretty doggone good. Had a lot of great information in there, and that was a little introduction to myself and Juliana. I know we had a little technical issue there when I was sharing, but hopefully you got the gist of what I shared about my situation. However, we want to thank you guys for tuning in. We're gonna close out. I wanted to encourage you to comment on the video or what you heard me and Juliana share, or any of the professional talk about, because what we realized on the last video, we saw that over 200 people viewed it, but we didn't see a lot of comments, and we don't know who viewed it because it won't let us see who viewed it. So if you view it, if you can please leave a comment. You can say something very simple, or you can say something very long. We just want to create dialogue, and we would like to hear from you versus just seeing that you viewed it. And I did set the settings where you could post it on your page so other people can view it. I did change my settings on all videos, so we're learning as we go along. We have some people that produces videos that's kind of showing us how to do it. So we want to say thank you for tuning in tonight. I want to give my wife the last words, and then we'll close out.
Let's all try to shed the stigma of mental illness, one person at a time.
And the way that we can shed this stigma is by talking about it.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying? And creating dialogue. And one of the things that my wife and I have done over the 20 years that we've been married and before we got married is my wife always says that therapy is very good, and I've experienced good therapy. Therapy is good, a little medication is great, and a lot of Jesus for us.
And sometimes you can do it natural.
Yeah.
All depends on the person.
Yeah. And when I say a lot of Jesus, you saw in the documentary, we had our Bibles out. My wife got connected to a church. I got connected to an awesome church, and we're still in that church 30 years later. But that may not be for everybody, but it was for us. It gave us a great support system and a great foundation. So some therapy, some medication, and whatever your spirituality perception
or you
is,
want to do it natural,
that's fine. We also realize that eating healthy and doing some natural stuff has also helped us as well, and we'll talk about that in the weeks to come. But this is day 1, episode 1 of Thomas and Juliana Living with Mental Illness. Thank you guys for tuning in. We'll come to you again probably next Wednesday or Thursday. We won't do Tuesdays, but it'll be between Wednesday and Thursday. We'll post episode number 2. Thank you guys. Have a good night. May God bless.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.